we export a lot of coal. The activists really would have you believe that we've simply got to stop that. That we need, if we're serious about climate change, Australia must stop exporting coal. And that's the usual response to the line that we're only responsible for about 1.1% of the world's emissions. Yes, but if you add in what we export, when that's burnt, it's 5%. As though somehow there's two big problems with that. One is coal's going to be burnt anyway. The world's using more than ever, coal, oil and gas, and will use more this year than it did last year. We know all of that. The second is nobody's talking about the raw economics of this. We like to live well in Australia. And without those exports, we will have the most massive hole to fill. We can't go on simply charging it up to our children with ever-expanding debt.
This reminds me, and it's probably the best way to respond to this question, but this reminds me of a conversation I had. It was a tier 1 bank that invited me to come and actually speak and educate their head of sustainability. Their head of sustainability was about to put up their sustainability policy, which was effectively about no coal, no investment in coal. And when we sat down, and obviously they were quite concerned, the other people in the organisation, because they knew that coal, the way this particular person was looking at coal was not really about the total picture. And when I sat down with this person, I just really want to understand this policy. When you say no coal, are you saying no coal for power, for steel, for cement, for aluminium, for chemicals, for fertilizers? I just really want to understand what this exclusionary policy means. And we were kind of met with someone a bit blank and not really understanding. These sort of exclusionary ideas that we have about eliminating coal, I call it the tentacles of coal. Coal goes into so many industries. So when you make a statement that we just don't need to export coal and keep coal in the ground, you're really shutting down multiple industries, not just coal. It's a critical input, either directly or indirectly.
The idea of coal having its tentacles everywhere, there you go, language that people say, well, that dirty coal. In reality, that's telling you, though, that there's almost no part of our daily living that isn't dependent upon coal.
We call it beyond combustion. One of the things that we recognise, particularly when we started to talk with policymakers, both in government and finance and investment sectors and areas, is that they didn't really understand what that total contribution of coal is. But equally, we've created something here that we call sustainable coal stewardship. And what that was is to really demonstrate, in particular, again, how China and India were looking at coal as a value chain and what that meant and how they could really evolve coal beyond its traditional uses. And the beyond combustion sectors are really some of the ones that we already know now, and steel, chemicals and the like, hydrogen, emerging, coal to liquids in terms of synthetic hydrocarbons and the like. But some of the new things that people were looking at is around, coal in terms of how can coal and coal waste, and how can I extract some high value products. And probably the US is really grabbed this at the moment. They've actually done a piece of research where they've looked at coal waste and they've extracted some rare earth elements, and we know that's important, to what we're doing today. And they've actually been able to increase their reserves by 8 times. And so there's an enormous amount,
reserves of critical
of rare earths,
really?
By 8 times to what they currently have. And so that's become a really interesting piece. And one of the conversations we've been having, and they're doing more research around things like in terms of the extraction of critical minerals as well out of coal waste. And so these are areas. So just to be clear, these are niche areas. Graphene's another area, carbon fibre. So graphene, for instance, is 200 times stronger than steel, lighter than paper. Carbon fibre is, real. So in terms of our we've got a growing population. There's going to be more development. What is that contribution to some of those critical areas that we can do? So looking at coal, beyond where we currently use it, is becoming an area that's increasingly of interest, and it is an area for Australia. We have coal waste. what else can we do with it? And we're really good at rehabilitating our land. There's absolutely no doubt about it. Our producers are some of the best in the world in terms of how, and people around the world want to learn from them. But if you could actually then create an opportunity where you could extract critical minerals and some rare earths, which really provide less dependence on importing some of those, those items, then what could that mean? How could that sort of change the picture for us? But just to be clear, at the moment, that's a niche market. It's a high value, but you're going to there's more value in that product. So yeah, I think it's really interesting. And again, it's very much, I see the US really thinking about security, national security, and really important ideas, and looking at coal beyond those, in the beyond combustion sector, and where we could potentially participate.